Hi, this is Mr. Curtis, and today what we're going to be doing is talking about those wonderful things that you have to do sometimes, and that is go to the family reunions. Many of us have to go and see our cousins, aunts and uncles, and all those good things. Raise your hand if you've had to do that. Yep. Well, as we go through and look at our cousins, a lot of times who we think are related and what we call them, we sometimes hear terms like first cousins, second cousins, or something like first cousins once removed. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today, and as you'll find out, a lot of people get these things mixed up. Now, as we go through this, if you can, try to think of people within your own family that these relations would be. So if you can think of a cousin, or as we get into them a little bit later, maybe a cousin of one of your parents. If you can get into your own family and think of examples of this, it'll make a lot more sense. And as with all of our videos, make sure that you are stopping and thinking and writing this out rather than watching the whole thing all the way through. You're going to have to spend a lot more time with this video actually thinking through and stopping and re-going through some things. So let's get going on some more. Let's begin with some relatives that you might be familiar with. Looking at the chart that I gave you here, how would person 1-1 and 2-1, how would they be related? Well, you've got one generation difference between these two, so that shouldn't be too difficult. Mother and son. How about person 1-1 and 3-1? Now we have two generations between the two, so it's this father's kid or this mother's kid. That shouldn't be too difficult. Grandmother and grandson. How about persons 2-5 and 2-6? Well, you've got a line coming down and it's obvious that they both came from the same line. So, brother and sister. Those should be ones that aren't too difficult. All right, moving on to this one. How about person 3-4 and 3-5? Now looking here, you've got a sister, and a brother, and it's the brother and sister's kids. That would be like your aunt and uncle. We call these first cousins. Another way of saying it is you and your aunt or uncle's kid. So if you can think of an aunt or an uncle and they have a kid, those people are your first cousins. Now, what about second cousins? Person 4-1 and 4-2, they would be second cousins. Now, notice again that they are the same generation, and I'll be emphasizing this quite a bit. You look, they are all the same generation. They're not two different generations here. And a way of saying who they are would be like saying your kid and your first cousin's kid. Think of a first cousin, if you can, an aunt or uncle's kid. If they had a kid and you have a kid, they would be second cousins. And, oh, by the way, second cousins can legally marry. We'll get into more stories about that later on. Moving on, third cousins. Again, look, we have people of the same generation, all of generation 5. Third cousins would be like your grandkid and your first cousin's grandkid. Now imagine you having a grandchild and then your first cousin having a grandkid. Those people would be third cousins. Here's another way of describing the very same thing. Your kid and your second cousin's kid. Again, these are two different descriptors, but they both describe third cousins. Now, let's review a little bit. Again, the first cousins generation. Notice how they are all the same generation. Then the second cousins generation. Again, all the same generation. Where's my marker? There we go. Notice that they're all the same generation. And third cousins, all the same generation. Now we're going to get into cousins of different generations, and this is called removed. Now, it doesn't mean that they're taken away or that they're gone or something like that. It just means if you are removed from a situation, you're away from it. And so here we're talking about different generations. So removed, if you think about it in these two ways, a generation removed, in other words, one generation difference, or a generation away. Now we're going to be talking about people of different generations. As we said before, first, second, and third cousins were all the same generation. Now we'll get into different generations. Let's try first cousins once removed. And if you remember, this was the first cousins generation. They have common grandparents. So first cousins once removed are going to be you and your first cousin's kid. So it's no longer the same generation. Here's the example. 3-1 and 4-4. These are first cousins once removed. Here's another way of thinking about first cousins once removed. If you can think of a cousin of your parents, so think about a cousin of one of your parents. Your cousin's parent and you are also first cousins once removed. You're not of their generation. You're one generation down, one generation removed. Now, first cousins twice removed. So the hint here, we're going to see 2 generations difference between the two. You and your first cousin's grandkid. So again, think about your first cousin. Imagine that your first cousin had a grandkid. That would be first cousins twice removed. 3-1 and 5-2. Notice again, and I keep emphasizing this, we have 2 generations difference here. So here's where they have in common, and then 2 generations down makes it twice removed. Once removed, twice removed. Here's the generation that they have in common, but you go down 2 generations and that makes them first cousins twice removed. All right, getting harder here. Second cousins once removed. Well, let's think about that. So this was the brother and sister generation. This is the first cousins generation. This is the second cousins generation. This would be the third cousins generation. Second cousins twice removed is going to be something in this generation and then 1 down. So imagine what that's going to be. The example I'm giving here, here's the descriptor, you and your second cousin's kid. So here, 4-1 and 5-2 are second cousins once removed. So again, I said, here's our second cousins generation, 1 generation down. 5-1 and 5-2 would be third cousins, which we mentioned before. All right, getting harder now. Third cousins 3 times removed. That would be you and your third cousin's great-grandkid. Holy cow, that is just like way the heck down there. So that's like 5-1 and somebody way, way down, which obviously we won't get into today. Somebody figured out just for fun that the Queen of England, she's often called QE2, and George Washington are related. And they are related, they are second cousins 9 times removed. It's 8 or 9 times removed. So imagine figuring that one out. Okay, so this is going to be a very difficult one for you to figure out. Make sure that you write down lots of questions. We will go through many examples in class, and we will see you next time.